there's this great big lie in the world we live in today that a small amount of effort just doesn't matter. So don't bother
Yeah.
doing it.
Yeah.
You know, for instance, so let's say we're reading a book. You wake up at, you know, heaven forbid you wake up at 8 o'clock in the morning because it was a late night or something. And you're thinking to yourself, it's not worth it to read even one page out of the book that I'm reading right now because I got to be at work in, 45 minutes or whatever. My whole morning routine is off. But if you did do that, what do you think that would tell you?
Yeah, absolutely.
That you are mentally tough enough to say, forget what my morning is throwing at me. I'm still going to try.
In this episode of Leading Lubbock, I sit down with Jackson Lindgren, home inspector, husband, and father, for a really meaningful conversation about leadership and personal responsibility. Jackson has a unique way of putting things into perspective, and in this clip, he shares a definition of leadership that challenges the way we think about discipline, sacrifice, and living with intention. Let's dive in. All right, welcome back to Leading Lubbock. Today I'm sitting down with somebody that I've been in the world of real estate with for a little bit. I've got Jackson Lindgren on with me today. So Jackson, thank you so much for being here, man.
Dude, it is a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
I just know that you love interacting with people.
Oh,
You
yeah.
love this kind of thing, and love that I get to sit down with you and just have a conversation about life. Because
Absolutely.
I know you're an open book. You've mentioned that before, and just one where personality shines.
To a fault sometimes. a
No,
little bit.
I don't think so. Like people
yeah.
see what they get, right?
Exactly, and they get
know
what they
it.
see.
That's right. So Jackson, you are a home inspector.
Yes,
So
sir.
You've got JNS Home Inspections.
Yes, sir.
And how long you been doing that?
So I started doing home inspections in February of 2018. So that would be 7 years now, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. I started real estate back in 2017. Been doing it for 8 years. So I mean,
Killer. Yeah.
probably just timing is just a little bit different on that. Not
Yeah.
the same year though. So.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you also are married, have
Yes,
a couple
sir.
kiddos. Tell
Yes,
me about
sir.
your family.
Yeah, so my beautiful, patient, and foreboding wife that I have is Evan. We've been married for, oh my goodness, coming up on 9 years now.
Okay.
And we've got two beautiful children, John Mark and Owen, 5 and 2, and they are absolutely amazing. They couldn't have two different personalities. My daughter, actually, as of the recording right now, broke her femur, or her tibia, just a few weeks ago. She's okay. It was not an offset break, so she'll be fine. But she is our throw caution to the wind child. Whereas my son, we joke that my daughter takes risks. My son will grow up to be in risk management. He
Yeah.
is so careful
Yeah.
about things. So it's fun to see two opposite ends of the spectrum in them, boy and girl, and all that too. And yeah, but it's been a wild ride, as anybody who's a parent knows.
Isn't that crazy how you've got, so we have 4 kids, and we have 4 personalities, man, all so different. But my older 2, I've got the very cautious one.
Yeah.
And he's the boy.
Yeah.
So you and not in a bad way, but in a way that's, I want to make sure he's going to limit his risks.
Yeah.
And then my daughter is the one that's like, hey, let's go catch spiders.
Yeah.
Let's go out in the wilderness and do some things.
And that's one of those things as a parent, you're playing the game of averages on that stuff. I mean, a trip to the ER, for most people, it's just going to happen eventually.
Yeah.
We got ours out of the way early. And by the way, I want to correct what I said. I said foreboding. I meant forbearing.
Forbearing.
Wife.
Okay.
Not foreboding. That's different. That's like horror movie type stuff. So I love you, dear.
I think I knew exactly what you were saying. There's probably people that picked up on that.
Yeah.
But,
The foot goes in the mouth quite a
bit. She's no stranger to that, huh?
Not with me. Not with
That's
me.
awesome. Yeah. All right, Jackson. Well, I want to get into some leadership with you, leadership topics.
Yeah.
One of the things I love about this show is just there's people in different walks of life. In every conversation I have, different levels of leadership. And I say levels in terms of like inside of business and some completely unrelated to business. And so one of the beauties of it is getting to experience from the people I'm talking to is what does it look like to have leadership in the home leadership in your community, leadership
Right.
in the business world that you're in. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm excited to hear what perspectives you have on it. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, just want to kick off a little bit with, what does effective leadership look like to you?
Mm-hmm.
How has that evolved over time? What's your ideas of leadership?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So not that any of the perspectives will be 100% right, but so for me, what leadership looks like in the home, especially, is taking responsibility is a big one. Humility. I'm a Christian, so a lot of my leadership sensibilities evolve from Scripture and from a scriptural understanding of what it means to be a father, what it means to be a husband, and what it means to lead in those regards. And that by no means means that my wife is not a leader in other regards as a wife and as a mother. She has different leadership roles, but that's the same. That's true in most companies and most businesses. People have different leadership roles. So specifically for me, what leadership looks like in my home typically is being the one that instigates change. Typically, I'm typically the one that has to lead by example. So if we want to start a diet, if we want to start an exercise routine, if we want to start, reading more, living in the world of ideas, exchanging ideas, whether it's intellectual growth, health growth, spiritual growth, it typically has to begin with me in the house initiating that, and then sort of being a cheerleader of those things and encouraging, because my wife, she herds cats for a living. She stays home with the kids. And so it's hard for her, while I'm out, listening to podcasts all day on my drive to work, doing those kind of things, to come home and be like, hey, honey, let's do this, that, and this. And she's like holding two kids. I'm like, do you realize the day that I've had? So trying to be tactical with how I instigate those kind of changes and cheer her on in those things. That's leadership for me at home, is leading by example, taking responsibility. And there's so many other facets to it too at home as well. But and then at work, when it comes to being a business owner, it's being the guy that's willing to, probably the one thing that I can think of the most is being the guy that has to have the hard conversations. Because as you know, with inspectors and realtors, sometimes heads will butt.
Yeah.
There will be people that we're training at our company that may call out an issue that's a problem, and a realtor gets upset, and maybe my guy doesn't know how to handle that situation. For me to be a leader, I can't be like, dude, you got to handle that. You're the one that called out the issue. Sometimes I have to step in and talk to the agent and sometimes take responsibility for those things. And that hasn't happened a lot, but when it does happen, you have to take it on the chin and be the one that says, I trained this person, we'll fix this, we'll take care of it, and we'll move on. And sometimes it requires growing a bit of a backbone too.
Yeah.
And not letting people walk all over you and be like, oh yeah, you're right, we're wrong, we'll fix this. Sometimes it means sticking up for your employees and being like, no, you did everything you were supposed to do in this situation. You're 80% in the right, this person's 20% in the right, there's some middle ground here, but let's try to figure it out, that kind of thing. So that's a big old word salad of leadership, but that's kind of what leadership is to a degree. It's multifaceted spider web.
Yeah. Well, I was curious, and I'm glad you went that direction, because I was wondering in the work world, in your environment, being a home inspector, because this is a unique conversation that I haven't had with anybody yet when it comes to leadership in a role like yours, where you are a service provider to not just one individual, but two parties, right? Your buyers as well as the agent who's working the transaction too. So my question was going to be, what does leadership look like there? And you started to hit on that through hard conversations. And
Yes.
I love that. I want to dive into that a tad bit more.
Let's do it.
Preston, just because it's going to show up at home too. And you're talking about being a change instigator, as somebody who's going to help initiate those types of things. And so those two elements really stood out to me as you were talking. What does it look like to take that as somebody who's listening, maybe in the business world, of like, how do I become a change instigator? And how do I step into those hard conversations? And you talked about having a backbone, right?
Yeah.
And so that's just something I think is super important. So tell me how that evolved. Like, what did that look like when you started versus like being in it for a while? Same thing with the change instigating at home.
Yes.
What did that look like as starting as a parent or a husband and evolving into somebody that's like, man, if we're going to make some changes, I may have to be the one as a head of the household, and in some instances,
Yeah, absolutely.
to get this moving.
Yeah, so the way it starts off with instigating change, the way that we all look at it in the beginning, we tend to be bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and want to, grab the world by the coattails and just, pull it down, put it in our pocket, as the great Chris Farley said on Saturday Night Live. We tend to want to lead by dragging people, I think. We read a book, we get an idea, and we want to start implementing it. And so we're like, dude, you've got to follow me. We've got to go do this thing, become a part of this thing. And I think sometimes that can come across as abrasive and ruin the good nature of the idea that you want to implement or the change that you want to implement, because people see it as antagonistic. You want them to change, as opposed to arm in arm being like, come with me on this journey. I want you to help me. I want us to figure this out together. So specifically in business, I think early on, the ways that I wanted to implement change was very often very abrasive. We got to do this. We got to implement this new software. We have to implement this new CRM to manage our contacts. We have to do this new particular method on inspecting. And this is just what we are going to do, and it's going to happen whether you like it or not. And I learned that that's a recipe for conflict. Depending on the way that you have your business structured, I mean, if you're the boss, sometimes you can get away with that. But a lot of times, specifically with us, we have a partnership, me and my partner, the S and J&S. I was very guilty early on of just not respecting people's sensibilities and feelings about change. So sometimes I think you have to be aware of those things if you are going to implement change, and be surgical and be tactical about where you implement change. Some people aren't ready for a brand new, customer management system or a brand new software when they just got the previous one figured out.
Yeah.
You put in the time to learn how to use it, to learn how to do it, and to learn how to iron out all the kinks, and then present that to them as a well-oiled machine, and be like, hey, what do you think of this? And also, too, don't be surprised when they say no and don't recognize where you see value in those things. That's okay. They haven't put the time into it or researched it like you. And I think a lot of times as leaders, we sometimes can take stuff like that personally. Because how many times have you read a book or read a concept or come excited to a thing to share with people, and they just don't see it the way that you do? And it's like, I kind of felt good about this, and I really wanted, I pictured that going differently in my head, this conversation. So, casting pride aside and just recognizing that it's not you that they don't like, it's just the idea that they're afraid of. So that's what it looks like to me in business, and how things have changed over time with that. And then the backbone question and what that looks like for me. Dude, I'm not a confrontationalist.
No? Okay.
I do not like confrontation.
Okay.
I don't think that I'm good in confrontational situations at all. My knees start to shake. It's not me. So if you ever see me in those situations and I'm calm, cool, and collected, it's a facade.
Something that you're a duck in that moment.
I do not like those moments at all, because I'm not good at arguing particularly. I didn't grow up in a household where I had I'm an only child. I didn't have brothers and sisters, didn't argue that much growing up. So I never learned those faculties from a young age of what it was like to defend your position on things or make your case known on things. I know a lot of youngest siblings that have grown up today that are excellent at arguing. And I think that's, indicative of all that. But anyway, on the backbone thing, I do think it's super important to develop that as quick as you can, because you got to learn, number one, the difference between having a backbone and being a bully, having a backbone and being manipulative, because they're not, they're obviously not the same thing. But, just having a backbone in this business where you stand your ground, where you explain to people why they might be upset in the realm of home inspections, towards something that you called out. They may have a legitimate reason for being upset, but that legitimate reason may not always be because you did something wrong. The legitimate reason may be that they just don't understand what it is that they're reading. They don't understand the implications of what it is you found on the inspection. And then, you stand up straight, you puff out your chest, and you say, let's calm down. Sometimes I've had to tell people, you're not going to talk to me that way. Please don't swear at me. Those kind of things. And I think a lot of times people aren't expecting you to do that. Number one, because we live in a somewhat passive culture where that tends to be the case. People just want to, like, okay, we're going to let the loudest person in the room be the loudest, and then we're going to move on.
Yeah.
So that on backbone, and then I'm sorry, was there another question about the family specifically?
Yeah, I was just curious if it evolved, but it sounds like it was something that was practiced over time.
It was. My wife, is very, very, very traditional. We have a very traditional understanding and a traditional practice of how we operate our home in terms of, I'm being a spiritual leader. She was raising our kids at home. That does not mean that I'm a tyrant, that, I make a decision and she's like, yes, sir. It's like, we talk things out, it's a committee. But at the end of the day, she respects the leadership position that I have in the home and honors that position and expects me to give her due reverence and love, so that we don't get on the crazy cycle. Where one of us doesn't love the other, and as a result we don't respect the other, and it becomes chaos.
So you've read the book Love and Respect, or is that what it's called?
Love and Respect series. We've been through the classes and all that.
That's awesome.
It's good stuff.
So much true to that, and the way that we relate to our spouses, and we usually, my wife and I, can tell when something's off. We could go back to that, and how have I not been that loving to her specifically?
Yes.
And in turn, how do I not feel respected? And it's usually some kind of combination of that.
But you can't say that too loud. You can't say that, because that's not quite politically correct in the day that we live in today.
True.
Yeah.
True.
We won't get into
it's
that.
out there now, so I don't know how we're taking that one back.
That's gonna be a sound clipped and sound bited into oblivion.
Held against me forever. No, so now I'm going to want to know what your daily rhythms look like. Are there things that keep you grounded in leadership? This is mentality. What does that look like for you on a regular basis?
So it hasn't been as consistent as I would like it to be. Okay. So I'm going to take you into where I was 7 months ago, when I was at my most consistent, and what my vision is for where I would like to be today. Because my view of consistency is like the row of glasses of water, that this one's full, this one's almost empty, this one's half, and then this one's almost empty, and this one's full. And like, that's consistency. It's like getting back to being full. It's not just always that way. So 7 months ago, I would have told you my daily routine for leadership, self-development, all those things. Get up at 6 a.m. at the very least. I'm a big believer in waking up early, starting your day early. Depending on what your life circumstances are, some people have shift work. I get that. But get up early if you can. I'm a big believer in cold showers and cold plunges. Like, this is my deal. I built a cold plunge from a freezer.
Okay.
I water sealed the thing, so I would get up, do a cold plunge, and the idea behind that, and about this in leadership, you're going to have to do something difficult pretty much every day. Well, there's a good way to insulate you if you get the most difficult thing that you could possibly do out of the way at 6 a.m.
Yeah.
The abrasive customer, you can look them in the eye and say, you're not the most difficult thing I've had to deal with today. Yeah. I've had to sit in ice cold water for 3 minutes, and this is good. And you don't say that to them out loud, but in your head, you're thinking, this is nothing. It's a mentality thing. People can talk about how, cold plunges may not be super beneficial health-wise, and we can get into all the health things. But for me, it was a mental thing. Yeah. Get the hard thing out of the way, eat the frog first thing. Then, I see you've got a Miracle Morning book over here. I'm a big believer in the Miracle Morning routine, savers, all of that. Yeah. Write something down, journal, write a sentence, kind of that Renaissance man experience of doing those things. Just something to ground yourself intellectually in the first part of the day. Prayer is a big one too for me. Recognizing that my troubles are not bigger than the God that I serve, getting those things out of the way, and then grounding myself before the day begins. And then, little things like delaying caffeine, until 90 minutes after waking up, all kinds of podcast stuff that you can look up and all the different benefits that those things have. Not looking at my phone is a big one too, up until a certain point in the day. Like, I try to delay my phone consumption till about 2 hours after I wake up, if I can. That to me is big. Otherwise, the rest of my day is just ruined, in terms of being distracted. So, and then I think, having a set piece of time in the morning too, where you set up appointments as far as, how am I going to generate business for the people that work for me? How am I going to generate business for the people that I'm responsible for? What am I going to do in terms of development of the systems that we have? Am I going to show people and, send messages to people in my business, whether it's my office manager, my business partner, my employees, and communicate to them that, hey, I didn't just sit in a big leather chair all week and bark orders at you. I actually spent some time this week thinking about how I can make your life easier. And I think just doing things like that on a fairly routine basis cultivates respect, and, honor from a place of leadership for people that work for you. When I was at my best doing those kind of things, that to me grounded me in leadership the most.
Yeah.
Just that consistent routine of responsibility.
I love that. One of the things that I love the most about what you said is the freedom and grace that you offered when you were talking about 7 months ago. This is what was going on.
Yeah.
And this is my vision for the future, future Jackson. And yet there's the reality of today.
Yep.
And you didn't beat yourself up over that and say like, I'm a terrible person because I haven't been doing that.
Yes.
And I think that's our tendency, and that's my tendency.
Oh yeah.
Where if I'm in a spell where there is just, a month or 2 months or even longer sometimes of not doing the things consistently that I think are valuable to me, that I can get hard on myself, like beat myself up over it. And I don't think I'm alone in that. Like, I think there's many people out there that's going to be their tendency, is say like, man, I'm just, I'm doing terribly. I'm a terrible person because of that, which is probably going to hinder us even more, because now we're bad talking ourselves, and the mind listens. It pays attention to what we're saying, how we're perceiving ourselves.
Yes.
And so I love that you're just saying like this average of who Jackson is. Like, there's going to be the days where the cup is empty, or moments, seasons maybe. And then there's going to be times when the cup is full. Yeah. And there's going to be times when it's right in the middle. And I love that it's like, basically you take your overall life, your last several months. Well, this is who I am.
Well, it's kind of because I'd like to draw a lot of things back to scripture and spiritually speaking. A lot of people have a great fear of not dying with a prayer on their lips. It's like, if I don't die with like the very last action that I do being something profoundly spiritual, then somehow my life was just not a good testament. That I don't believe that being the case. Yeah. It's like, the reality is that every moment of life is not always going to afford you to be the ideal version of who you want to be. If it did, we probably wouldn't be in the mess that we're in.
Sure.
But we're not all Elon Musk. We're not all just ridiculously productive people that optimize every moment of our day for maximum productivity. And I think it says something too. It's like, who's the stronger person? The one that can take a punch and get back up and keep going, or the one that has never had to take a punch but has such a consistent life? It's the Rocky speech. It's not about how hard you hit, but how hard you get hit and can keep going. And that's the glasses analogy that I like about that, because if you walked into my front door at some point this week, probably this morning actually, and I just spouted to you my ideal routine, but you walked in this morning at 7:39 a.m. and looked at my fat, ridiculous, lazy excuse of a human being on my recliner and thought, I'm noticing an inconsistency here, dude. Like what's going on here? Yeah. But it is what it is. We're human, and we got to try to be the best that we can be. But my advice would be, don't lose yourself in the frustration of it not being ideal every day. Yeah. Because you'll never get there.
Yeah.
So
I agree. And I think too, that you talked about consistency, you used that word, even as you were talking through the glasses, I believe. And I think there's so much to simple consistencies.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be the full on out every day I do this and every day I do that, but even if there's something small that's grounding you on a daily basis, that goes a long way too, because then you can build on that thing. And if it's real small, it's still there, and it can still be grown, and some days it may shrink, but that whatever it is still exists.
That's atomic habits. That is what it is. the best time to plant a tree, 20 years ago,
Sure.
second best time today. I mean, but the thing is that I think there's this great big lie in the world we live in today that a small amount of effort just doesn't matter. So don't bother
Yeah.
doing it.
Yeah.
For instance, so let's say we're reading a book. You wake up at, heaven forbid, you wake up at 8 o'clock in the morning because it was a late night or something. And you're thinking to yourself, it's not worth it to read even one page out of the book that I'm reading right now because I got to be at work in, 45 minutes or whatever. My whole morning routine is off. But if you did do that, what do you think that would tell you?
Yeah, absolutely.
That you are mentally tough enough to say, forget what my morning is throwing at me. I'm still going to try. The next day, I guarantee you your tank is going to be full and you're going to be ready to tackle it. So,
Sure.
anyway.
Yeah, that's an identity thing too.
Oh, yeah.
And which is also in Atomic Habits where the little votes that you cast on a daily basis help inform the whole picture of who you are going to be,
Absolutely.
who you want to be. So that's great. Is there a moment in your life that's impacted the Jackson today, like who you are as a person? Any key? Doesn't have to be a particular one, but anything fundamental?
Man, from a business standpoint, I would have to say it's, without getting too deep into the weeds here, from a business standpoint, what probably made me what I am today had to be having kids. Really just the moment my son was born and realizing that it's time to grow up, and just thinking about me as a person, a lot of, my personal struggles are the result of having parents that refuse to grow up. Not trying to bash people or, have a therapy session here, but a lot of people experience this, trauma, those kind of things. It's a lot of it's a result of parents that refuse to grow up and take responsibility for the kids. And so I think like looking at my son and, daughter when she was born too, realizing that if I don't start taking responsibility and start realizing that my cup is no longer for me, I have to pour it into other people. I should have realized that a long time ago, but now it's literally not just for me. I have to pour it into these other people that are dependent upon me to exist, to draw their next breath. You just realize that it's time to grow up. You have no other choice. Otherwise, you're going to sacrifice your humanity just so that you can have the life that you want, Yeah. I mean, it doesn't make sense. So I think just coming face to face with that reality of here's this human being that you've helped create that you will do anything to protect is yours, and you now have to start sacrificing pieces of yourself for the rest of your life just to make sure that they have everything that you didn't and that they have the tools that they need to not only survive but thrive. And you are going to love every moment of it. Every piece that you pull out of yourself and put into them, it's going to hurt, but you're going to love it.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably been the biggest thing for me. So not one moment, but a course of growing over time.
Okay.
As a result
that was going to be my next question. Was it a moment when you just like held this child for the first time and like, oh boy?
I mean, the Hollywood-esque nature of our culture would suggest yes.
Yeah.
That there would be a cinematic moment that it all came to the forefront of my mind, but it's a combination of both. I think in the moment you realize it, but there's a difference between knowing and understanding. I think you know the moment that they're born, but you don't understand until you actually have to start doing those things, or you start, again, heaven forbid that you've had to deal with this, but if you have, I hope people have learned the right lessons from this. But the moment you start to look at your kids and notice where your lack of sacrifice for them has hurt them, where your kids start asking questions like, Daddy, why aren't you here during this time? Why weren't you at swim practice? Why weren't you at this thing? Why won't you play with me? All these things. And it starts to hit you like it's no longer, they're not houseplants on wheels anymore, just kind of walking around the house, messing with stuff. They're becoming people. And as they become people, you start to notice where your flaws start to shine through, and that becomes just so evident over time. Yeah. So, yeah.
You said there's a difference between knowing and understanding. And
Fortune cookie wisdom.
Man, that's good. That's like going to be quote of the day from Jackson. I love that because there's so much truth to, yeah. I remember when my wife told me we were pregnant. She was pregnant with our oldest son, so firstborn, and there was this like, oh my goodness, like I got to grow up. I've got to think financially, like how are we going to do this? What does this look like? There's a lot of responsibility involved in this. But the understanding piece, you're right. Like until you have the child, until you experience the first night where they can't sleep and you don't know what's wrong with them and you've got to figure it out, and all these scenarios are running around in your mind. Like that's the understanding bit. Absolutely. Right. And then the second thing that really stood out to me is this idea of course correcting along the way.
Yeah.
It's almost this maybe feedback loop of we're doing this for a little bit, and that being really attentive to what is the feedback I'm receiving now from my child. And unfortunately it can be negative to that point of like, Dad, why aren't you playing with me? Like when was the last time when we played catch in the front yard? Okay, that's my feedback. And now it's time to figure out what to do next, right? Until I get the next piece of feedback, which could be positive too.
Pay attention. I mean, pay attention is the biggest thing. It's just your kids will tell you what you need to do to love them. Yeah. What they really appreciate. I mean, just paying close attention. Like, I'll give you a personal example. This is odd for people to think this about me or to know this about me. I'm not a handy guy. Like I'm not. It's really? Weird.
Yeah, it is weird.
As a home inspector, I mean, walking contradiction. But I'm not the kind of guy that wants to fix stuff. I'm the kind of guy that says, "Here's the check. Just you take care of it."
That is 100% me too. I mean, get it.
Because I would rather spend my time doing other stuff.
Yeah.
But when it comes to artistic type stuff, projects, things that I would maybe build for people or for us, I'm trying to get better at that. So, for instance, I've been building a play deck for my son and my daughter eventually too when she gets old enough, but specifically for my son. And it started off as 4 concrete posts in the ground in the backyard. Getting them plumbed, getting them set up was a nightmare. Finally got it done. And just when he saw that, and then when he saw the picture of what it could be, he was excited. He was excited and said, "Thank you for doing this for me, Dad. I love you so much." And my son is a boy that he feels things very deeply. Like he's a very empathetic child and very sensitive in those ways. But it wasn't until I got the cross joists, the framing all up, and then started putting on the decking boards up there. And I've got knee pads on and I'm drilling in all the decking boards. And I get enough in where I have him up there with me and he sits down up there with me. And in the space of about 2 minutes, he hugged me and told me that he loved me about 7 times. Aww. He just couldn't do it enough. And I got to thinking after he climbed down, walked into the house, I had a silent moment of reflection where I realized just do more stuff for him.
Yeah.
Make more stuff for him. Yeah. Buy some Lego sets, build a thing of Legos and hand it to him. And, it's just our kids need everything from us, but sometimes it's a lot more simple than what we make it out to be. And if you come home and look at the deck, it's not winning any awards. Right. I promise you now. But he doesn't care. It's just a thing that elevates him off the ground so he could slide down.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I just to make sure we don't underestimate here or shortchange that moment, it probably wasn't even just the thing. You mentioned you were both up there together, right?
Yeah.
And you were on top of the world for that moment together.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think it was this shared experience, and I think that's a testament too of your relationship with him. And so that alone too, it just speaks a lot.
I appreciate that. It's taken some time to grow up in those regards. I mean, in that moment, I was metaphysically and literally elevated. Yeah. We were up, awesome. It was just amazing. So
well, what a fun
Where's
moment.
The tissue box?
Right. It's all right. We got this. Okay, so tell me about something that you know now that maybe you wish you'd have known 10, 20 years ago. It's a while back.
Buy Bitcoin, probably.
Okay.
No.
It's funny. I actually brought that up not long ago. I was teasing him about like, what are you investing in years ago? And like, what is this thing? And then now it's like, well, Who's laughing now?
Yeah, it's
okay.
like, oh, it's not even a real thing. It's like you're not a real thing, sir.
That's exactly right.
Man, the thing I would have wish I would have known 10, 15 years ago probably would be just to take more time to learn, to to learn to become a professional student earlier in life. You know, we're afforded stuff like YouTube, Skillshare, all kinds of cheap, almost free opportunities to learn just about anything you want. And I wish I would have taken learning more seriously at a young age. You know, high school, college, early college just kind of ruined me on the concept of being a student. You know, just because of the way that I think in some ways the way that the school system functions. You know, I think a lot of people would admit that our systems are broken in a lot of ways. I mean, they do have a lot of positives too, but in so many ways for me, it just taught me that learning is a chore and there's no point to it.
Yeah.
But now, I'm a big proponent of being a Renaissance person, like a Renaissance guy, like trying to learn a lot of different skills, trying to be somebody who has, you know, a collection of knowledge that you amass over time. So, like for instance, with books and stuff, I think one of the most meaningful things you can do in the pursuit of knowledge is to develop a personal codex of the things that you've learned and the things that are meaningful to you. Because if you think about it, when you die, your books will probably go to a garage sale.
Yeah.
You know, and there'll be a lot of things that are underlined in them, and maybe people will be like, "Oh, he thought that was interesting." But what if you had a system in place, digitally or physically, that was just a system of note cards or typed up notes and things and bits of information that you had synthesized over time that showed what you understood from the great body of knowledge that you consumed over time. And I think a lot of people, you know, think, well, how am I ever going to do anything like write a book? How am I ever going to do anything like, you know, write professionally for a living? And I'm telling you right now, if, you know, with looking at all the books on your shelf, if you applied a system like that to that kind of discipline of reading, you would be surprised at how quickly the concept for writing your own book would come to you as a result of that. So I say all that to say that it just woke me up to, you know, how much time I had wasted not learning meaningful things earlier in life.
Okay.
So I know it's kind of esoteric and out there and kind of eccentric, but that's my jam.
Oh,
I
no.
love that kind of stuff.
And I'm with you. I think documenting, really what I hear when you're saying that is like sifting through, right? You can read any one of these books on the shelf, and you're probably going to pick up something a little bit different than I pick up when we're reading the same book. Maybe same general concept, but how it applies to you or how it was presented looks completely different. And I think that's what sometimes we can get distracted by is, oh, it's just the same info. So why am I regurgitating that same info? And what I hear you saying is, you know, I've got all these different concepts from all these different things that I've learned along the way. And how do I take that, sift through it, reform it and shape it and say, and this is what I received from it through the life of Jackson specifically.
Yes.
That may or may not resonate with me, but I bet there's bits and pieces I can take from that too that's helping form and shape what I took out of that.
Absolutely.
And everything else and pass that on. So it's like just this I don't think any of our ideas are new.
No.
Right? We go
There's
back
nothing new under the sun.
thousands and thousands of years, and like we're saying the same thing, and it just looks a little bit different. We synthesize that a little bit different, and we'll always do that.
Yes.
And so I think that's what's really fascinating, and I hope to pick up your book someday. So I'll be on the lookout.
I hope to write it one day.
I think you should. Well, what are you learning right now? Like, what's anything standing out to you as you're reading or listening to podcasts or implementing in your life?
Man, so do you want to jump the gun and go to these? Or
Let's
do you want
do
me
it.
to,
Yeah.
Okay.
It could be perfect segue.
So, man, Amusing Ourselves to Death by Neil Postman is probably a yearly read for me. Like I read it. Oh, dude, it's like my. Okay, so like I said, I am a Christian, and I do love my Bible, and I do read. So my friends who are holding me accountable to this, I don't want them to hear this and hear the wrong thing. I'm trying to say, some people have a copy of Jesus Calling on their bedside.
Yeah.
Well, for me, it would be amusing ourselves to death, as weird as that sounds. But there's just so much good, actionable information in it that helps a person understand the world of media that we live in today. So for instance, just for some background, Neil Postman was a media critic / theorist from the 1980s. He existed before that, but in 1985 he wrote this book, and he was a student of a man named Marshall McLuhan. Marshall McLuhan coined the phrase that you've probably heard: "The media is the metaphor," or excuse me, the medium is the message. And what he meant by the medium is the message, Marshall McLuhan, was that the medium by which you consume a message is equally, if not more important than the message being conveyed through that medium. Okay. So for instance, if I am reading a book physically, that's one thing. That is conveying to me a message. If I am listening to a video or watching a video on my iPad, the medium that communicates that message to me is very important, and I need to consider what this medium is telling me about the nature of the knowledge that I'm consuming. So, Neil Postman, in writing this book, he explored that idea to great depths in that we have moved from a culture that has been dominated for hundreds of years by what's called the typographic mind. The mind that respects the written word above all in terms of how it gets information. Before that, we were an oral culture. Before writing, it was just oral traditions. Famously, the Odyssey and the Iliad were passed down orally.
Yeah.
It wasn't written down till hundreds, if not 1,000 years after the actual events of the Odyssey and the Iliad. But the typographic world that we lived in was a world where ideas could be communicated a lot faster, but a lot more coherent and a lot more in depth. You had the ability to write down things as clearly as possible and communicate those ideas super clearly. And so that's why we get the Renaissance. That's why we get the Age of Enlightenment. That's why we get men like, Thomas Paine, Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, founders of our country that are really smart dudes because they're childs of the Enlightenment and they have what's called a typographic mind. Okay, so the medium of the book values really cohesive argument and really strong ideation, all that's what it values. He's making the argument that as we move into the 1980s, we see the age of entertainment, where the TV and, you could replace that with smartphone today. Let's just replace it with smartphone today. The smartphone and digital media today has taken information and has now created a new value system around information, where no longer cohesive ideas are the things that's valued, but it's quick bites of information that are sensational.
Yeah.
So reading a book like this just opens you up and sensitizes you to the concept of, I need to be careful with how I consume my information. For instance, like, how many times do you get on Twitter? I hope not a bunch. How many times do you get on X, TikTok, short form video, and see a video where it says, what would you have done in this situation? And it's an interaction between two people, and it's obviously staged.
Yep.
And it's typically got a racial motivation, or maybe some kind of hate crime thing, or maybe someone's just bumping into somebody in traffic or whatever. And you got people in the comments saying, oh, this person's in the right, or that person's in the right. If you don't have a discerning mind, you're just going to look at that and say, oh, yeah, I should have done this, that, or this. But the person watching that and thinking, is this staged? Is this just meant to get, a rise out of me? Is this just meant for engagement? Because those types of mediums, the medium of visual media, what it values most above all is engagement, stimulation, and entertainment. Whereas the written word, what it valued was, it was there just to communicate an idea. It just wanted to communicate the essence of the idea to you, allow you to approach, he has a phrase in the book that I really like, to approach the cold abstraction of the written word. And I like that because it's just you and the word by yourself.
Yeah.
You have your faculties, you're reading it, you have to reason with yourself. No sensationalism, no emotion. You're just trying to figure out what's on the page and what it's saying to you. So that right there, again, is my jam. I love living in that world, and I love how it opens you up to, like I said, being desensitized to the way that media influences the knowledge that it communicates to us. Huge word salad. So if you want to unpack any of that.
Man, well, one, I could tell you've read the thing over and over again. Even the way that you're picking out certain phrases, and like you could tell they've been cemented in your mind, which is helpful. And I'm a big advocate of read as many books as you can, but finish the good ones.
Absolutely.
And then reread the really good ones over and over again.
Absolutely.
And so, yeah, I love that you've done that with that book. You kind of found your thing.
Yes.
And that's kind of the one that you go back to regularly. And not to say that's the only one, right? I'm sure there's others for me, there's some that I will repeat on an annual or biannual basis. I've never done the 3 times a year. So that's
once you find it, man, it's going to be hard to go back.
That's awesome.
But one more quick thing on his book, a little tidbit. This is a little takeaway for people who are interested. You think about TikTok being a new thing, a new sensation. So you think about swiping, how one piece of information that you're getting from swiping through short form video may be, a cat video. And it's just something funny, a cat falling off of a ledge and, running away. Oh, haha, move on. The next video is a video of an airstrike in the Middle East somewhere, and it's something really violent. And then the one after that is maybe something that's a bit lewd or a bit, meant to appeal to some people's, more vice nature, that kind of stuff. So in the space of 60 seconds, you've received 3 pieces of information that have nothing to do with each other.
Right.
They're void of any kind of connection to each other. And to a degree, I think we're training our minds through doing that to ignore context and ignore the need for context and ignore the need for continuity when we consume media. So I think that's a lot, too, of why we see a lot of movies today being less coherent. Plot structures, they're not the same as what they used to be. But you go back to him and Postman talking about this, he recognized this as a problem when the telegraph was coming out.
Oh, wow.
Because telegraphs would be sent to people in like 1880 something, and it would say something like... Yeah, it would say something like, avalanche occurred in Montana, a small town, yada, yada, and that message would go to a town in Texas or something. Yeah. Okay, cool. The very next message 5 minutes later would say, a famine occurring in this town over here. Yeah. Those 2 pieces of information have nothing to do with each other.
Yeah.
And then we're thinking TikTok is a new thing. Again,
different form
nothing new.
Yeah.
It's been the concept has been here for a long time, and the idea and the concern about it existed a long time before what we see today. And I think just opening yourself up to that being a possibility trains you to have your head on a swivel a bit more about this stuff. So anyway,
no, and 2, I can't stop thinking about even the way that we not receive communication but give communication. And going back to the days when you were handwriting a letter to somebody and you were taking the time and the cursive was actually pretty, and it was very, like, you took things very seriously, almost romanticizing a little bit of the way that it looks. And then I think what that does is it shapes the content, right? So the content is it was forged in artistic love. And very, there's thought behind it and there was emotion behind it. And now, these texts are just like
AI prompt, just basically.
Exactly. Yeah. And so that's interesting too, taking it from that perspective of like that form of communication changes what comes out of it, right?
Absolutely.
In the way that it's portrayed. So
100%.
Man, I'm excited to jump into that.
Let me know what you think. We need to get together after you finish, and I want to hear what you think about it.
Absolutely. And what I'm going to have you do too is just jot a little note to somebody, whoever the reader is, and we're going to give that out, at the end of the show. We'll put that out on Instagram, and somebody will get to read it too. And then you also brought another book.
Yes.
So tell me a little bit about this one.
So the people that are going to have a collective groan as they see the title, because they will most likely have seen the movie No Country for Old Men and think, okay, that was a weird neo-Western that had a strange ending. So first off, before I go into it, have you seen the movie?
I have seen bits and pieces of the movie. I've not seen it all together. Okay. I know.
So I don't want to spoil too much for you. because man, okay, so I'm a big classic literature guy. I love like old stuff.
Okay.
Count of Monte Cristo, Brothers Karamazov, just old Russian War and Peace, that kind of stuff. That's my jam too. I love. So I'm not one of these people that typically will say I like modern literature.
Okay.
This guy, Cormac McCarthy, he wrote in the 1960s. I absolutely think that his stuff holds a bright candle to things that were written long ago too. Like he's one of the greatest authors that's ever lived. And this story, so a quick background on this, when he wrote No Country for Old Men, it was initially written as a screenplay and was rejected. And so he wrote a book, and then the year after he wrote the book, they just had to make a movie about it.
Word.
So it's one of the coolest stories. It's like one of the biggest, like, yeah, okay, fine, I'll do it myself kind of moments where he wrote it. And when you read it, it reads like a screenplay. So it reads really easy, but it's basically a story of how time and chance affects us all, how one decision can cause a fork in the road of our life to lead us down a path that we probably may not want to go down. It's a philosophical work about the nature of evil, those kind of things, and it's all packaged in a really neat, tightly structured plot of a neo-western in 1980s Texas. Like I said, without giving away too much, it's just a very compelling story. The characters are super compelling as well. The ending is a bit unconventional, but if you pay really close attention to the ending, I think you'll be well rewarded for closely paying attention to the dialogue. It has some of the best dialogue ever. There's a line that I like to use a lot with my kids. There's a scene in the book and in the movie where one of the main characters, Llewellyn Moss, he's the cowboy, he has a pistol in his back pocket that he got out in the desert where he got a satchel full of money, which is kind of the MacGuffin of the story that takes him along as the story goes. And his wife says, "Llewellyn, where'd you get the pistol?" And he says, "At the getting place." And so anytime my kids ask, "Dad, where'd you get that?" I say, "At the getting place." So it's just an extremely quotable book, an extremely quotable movie. But yeah, I would highly recommend it.
Okay.
But just don't be expecting like your typical Western where people ride off into the sunset. It kind of subverts that. But it subverts your expectations, I think, in a very intelligent and respectful of your time kind of way.
Okay. I'm out of novels to read in my house, and so you just gave me what I needed for my next adventure.
Dude,
so I appreciate that. And
I mean, it will. I mean, 260 pages. You'll be through it. You'll be through it in a few days.
Okay,
you're good.
So we got 2 books to talk about in the near future. I'll follow up with you.
I love it.
All right. Well, man, I've enjoyed today. I think you are. You're a great communicator. That's one of the things that has really stood out to me today is like you have a concept.
I appreciate
You're
that.
very articulate about how to present that in a way that one just communicates you understand it, but also is done in a way where people can understand you and what you're talking about. So
I certainly hope so, because sometimes I worry that I vomit word salads on people and that nothing gets through. So I appreciate that very much, more than you know.
Well, one of the ways that I want to conclude every episode is just summing up what we talked about into a single sentence of how you would define leadership.
Gotcha. I would define leadership as self-sacrifice to the point of self-sacrifice to the point of not screwing over your future self for the sake of your present self.
Oh,
is the way I would look into that. I don't the way I think of it is like a lot of times, we sacrifice our future self on the altar of present self. We think about, okay, me tomorrow at 6 a.m. can kiss my rear. Me tonight at 8:30 is going to play Halo until midnight.
Yeah.
Forget you, man. I don't have to deal with you. That to me is leadership. It's the recognition of, putting off instant gratification, that kind of thing. Have you ever seen The Prestige by chance?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So this will probably be a reference. So in The Prestige, Angier, he's the guy who makes the clones of himself.
Yes.
And
yes.
he's repeatedly killing off his clones.
Yes.
Just so he gets the opportunity to stand in the spotlight at the end of the trick all the time. And he says to oh goodness, Christian Bale's character, I forget his name, but he says to his character, it took immense courage to step into there every single night and not know if I was going to be the man in the spotlight or the man that was in the box that was going to be drowned. And the whole concept is that he's having to drown these clones because he can't have a bunch of clones of him walking around, but also too, he wants to be in the spotlight.
Right.
And I think it's one of the reasons I love that movie so much is it speaks to this deep idea of how we will literally kill pieces of ourselves just so we can be in the spotlight.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, so dude, this is what I'm talking about. Like, this is why stuff like this to me matters, is because in an age where we're taught that the only meaningful thing that we could consume on a screen is going to happen in about 15 seconds, you can't get those kind of takeaways from films like that.
Yeah.
And we won't see films like that ever again unless we have a collective mind that wants to look for things like that. Mm-hmm. The directors won't think we'll ever pick up on it. So that's a podcast for a different day where I'll geek out over media like all day long, bro.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
So
no, that's good. That man, you just kind of rocked my world at the end of that. So Haley, my wife, and she sent me a little picture yesterday actually, and it said something about, it was kind of joking about doing something. It was a very selfish thing of like avoiding problems and just like being in a good book or something. Mm-hmm. With, I don't remember how it started, but it ended with, and no respect for tomorrow. And just like, man, there's moments where I'm doing that, of like, I'm doing whatever I want to right now that's not edifying. Like, it's not building me up at all. It's not beneficial to me or anybody else. And it's definitely not having any respect for me in 24 hours. Right.
Yes.
It's just like, this moment's the only thing I'm looking at.
Yeah.
And that's great, man. You summed that up really well.
Oh man,
I like that.
It's great stuff. Thinking about these things, it's paramount. It's important.
No.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think we could keep talking for a long time. This could probably be a 2 or 3 hour episode if we let it.
We'll release the director's cut, later on.
That's right. But thanks for coming on today, Jackson. I appreciate your time, and
absolutely.
Keep doing what you're doing, man. It just seems like your head is just such on a great direction. It just does not surprise me at all. You were nominated to be on here,
I appreciate that,
you
man.
have a lot to offer the world. So don't give up on that. Just keep running that race.
I appreciate that very much. Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for sharing your wisdom, and we'll catch up again soon.
Sounds good, man.
All right.